achieved.
July 28th, 2010 was when I posted my first YouTube prediction video. And basically it went like this. I said, you know what? I watch the sport a lot. I enjoy betting on the sport and predicting it and being involved that way. Let's make a video because my new laptop has a webcam. Boom. We went about doing it. It currently has 270 views, and it's not well done. You know, I did my best to slap it together, but it was back when I actually got in front of the camera. So yeah, you can tell I've definitely aged a little bit if you've seen me recently. But, you know, here we are, almost 7 years to the date, still going strong, still one of the most moderately below average respected predictors in the game, I'd like to say. And we're just keep kicking it along with a solid fan base. Now, the reason I bring this up is because my involvement in mixed martial arts beyond the prediction game has been, you know, I've had some interviews with fighters, I've dabbled in some graphic design work for organizations, I've been to the Adrenaline Training Center in London on a couple of occasions, but recently I've taken an interest in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm too old to start fighting and actually competing in mixed martial arts at this point, and slightly too out of shape, even though we're trying to fix that. And I've recently taken interest in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've got a couple of friends who partake, and I have you know, having watched so much tape on the sport, I certainly have a knowledge base of positioning and holds and such like that. And I've actually been talking with one of them about just rolling for the sake of rolling to see what it's like. I'm under the expectations I would get my absolute ass kicked because the individual I'm discussing with is a blue belt. That's impressive. And but at the same time, I want to know. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to get punched in the head, but still in an actual fight. But what I would like to do is just roll, grapple, and see what it's like to be in certain positions. And, you know, part of me, the sadistic part, wants to know what it's like to be in a position where you're about to get choked out, and it's either tap or take a nap. Very curious. This individual's a little bit hesitant because they're like, oh, I don't want to hurt you or do anything bad. But at the same time, I keep just goading them on in an attempt to create a scenario where they're just like, okay, fuck it, let's do it. I'll keep you updated on how that goes. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC on Fox 25 card, which will take place on July 22nd in Uniondale, New York, and this card has a very New York feel to it. Several of New York's prominent mixed martial artists will be competing. I read somewhere it's almost like New York versus the world. It's very much what it feels like. I'll be giving you my 4 main card predictions for the main card. Yes, my 4 main card predictions for the main card of the show. That makes sense. On this episode of the show, all of my preliminary picks, and there are 9 bouts in total, will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so please check them out. I'm coming off a crackerjack of a outing. I think I've said that in the past. I went 9-3, including picking Santiago Ponzinibbio and Paul Felder to pick up massive upsets, which they both did. I did have Jojo Calder, which didn't work out, but hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, folks. The bet packs produce winning numbers. Again, I'm rolling there. I believe I did the tally, and over the last 5 shows, I'm like 44-16 or something like that. It's a pretty good record. I'll take that. It's a pretty strong record. Yeah, so certainly doing well. It's nice to see my slump turn around. Again, we can start a new slump at any point in time. Let's not make it today. Let's get to that first main card prediction. The opening bout of the main card takes place in the UFC's Bantamweight division as the number 4 ranked Jimmie Rivera, 20 wins and 1 loss, takes on the 9th ranked Thomas Almeida of Brazil, also with a very strong record, 21 wins and just a single defeat. Now, Rivera comes into this fight on a massive 19-fight winning streak, and he could be on the cusp of an opportunity to contend for the title. He is 4-0 in the UFC with a series of wins that are very impressive, including defeating fellow contender Pedro Munoz, Yuri Alcantara, longtime veteran, and now retired but long-respected Uriah Faber. Those are all very big names. For Almeida, he's coming off a TKO victory over Albert Morales. He rebounded from a knockout, the first loss of his career, a knockout loss to the now champion Cody Garbrandt. Cody Garbrandt, of course, escalating himself to an opportunity to fight for the title on the basis of that win. Almeida is 5-1 since stepping into the octagon. Physically, the Brazilian is 3 inches taller, he'll have a 2-inch reach advantage, and he's the younger man by 2 years. Now, looking first at Rivera, the man has 14 wins by decision. His only loss came in his second pro bout. It was a split decision defeat, so it shows how competitive he has been in all of his matchups. Even in his 1 loss. He has just 4 knockouts on his record, but keep in mind 3 of those 4 knockouts have come in his last 6 victories. So he is a type of guy who seems to be finding that nice combination of power and striking skill to start putting guys away. For Thomas Almeida, he's been doing that all of his career. 17 wins by KO, just a single loss, the aforementioned defeat to Cody Garbrandt, 2 decision victories, 16 first-round finishes. So Almeida is a bona fide killer. Now, looking at the Brazilian first, he is a lethal striker. Calculated, covers up well, looks for openings constantly. He counters very effectively. He likes to start low when he throws combinations and rise up for a hard left hook. Again, his combinations very effective. Hard leg kicks. He works in elbows. He works in knees. He is the complete package as an offensive striker. I really like the way he likes to shoot a straight right over the top of his opponent's guard. He can really snake it in there. It's quick, it's powerful, it can do damage, and it's very difficult to defend against. Now, when he fought Yves Jaboué back in the day, he decimated him with combinations. He dropped Brad Pickett with a step-in elbow and finished him with a jumping knee. He has a variety of weapons to call upon. Now, at the same time, when he fought Pickett, and that was a very fun fight for as long as it lasted, he got dropped a couple of times in the opening round. He broke his nose, and a lot of people had questions about his durability in that fight, and it showed he can persevere through tough situations. But at the same time, even though Pickett hurt him, wasn't able to get him out of there, we saw Cody Garbrandt smash him and finish him. And really, Garbrandt was tagging him with several shots as he moved forward, and you saw Almeida start to hesitate. He eventually turtled up and was put away. Anthony Burchak had success hurting him. And while Almeida eventually fired back and did get the finish in that matchup, again, he can be hit, and we're seeing that there are some issues with his defensive game. He is a southpaw, which, keep that in mind, he tends to let his left hand drop a little bit and allows his opponents to land a right hand through. But Brad Pickett, on the other side of things, was working a solid left hook around the guard of Almeida and cracking him and hurting him, and that's what was giving Thomas a lot of issues. Now, keep in mind, Pickett in that fight was having a lot of success with those close-range boxing exchanges, not allowing Almeida to set up those long strikes, not allowing him to use his length and his reach to hurt him and touch him where he couldn't, and Almeida had a tendency to stand directly in front of him and was allowing that offense to get through. Additionally, as far as Almeida's defensive grappling is concerned, we've only seen a minimal amount of him put on the ground. He likes to attack submissions as soon as he hits the mat to try and force his opponent to get up off him, defend, and get out, as opposed to look to control position and settle in. Now, Rivera, he has a high school wrestling background, and he's a good volume striker, which he works together very well, and that's been kind of the keys to his success, both in the UFC and outside of the UFC. Now, more so inside the octagon, he's been a defensive wrestler. We have seen pre-UFC tape where he's used takedowns to really control his opponents and win decisions. His best UFC output was 3 takedowns in his win over Yuri Alcantara. So, it's something worth noting here. Will he look to try and mix it up and put Almeida on his back and take him out of his comfort zone? Now, when Rivera's striking, he throws short, crisp combinations, 2 3-punch combos. He'll rip to the body. He's got a very, very nice uppercut. He has snapping good leg kicks, and he'll finish combinations off often with a low kick as well. Watch for him to throw a big right hand. He steps in, and he can cover a lot of ground with it very quickly, and he'll use head movement to set it up. He keeps moving. He's never stationary, and then he pops those strikes in there with that speed and ferocity. Catches a lot of guys off guard. Now, I also like Rivera. He can be defensive. He can counter-strike. He can sit back, and he can, land strikes. And one thing I like what he does is it's not that he's getting mad or getting over aggressive, but he responds when an opponent lands a strike. He comes back to 2 3-punch combinations. So if they're going to land strikes, they better not leave it just one. They better get 2 or 3 of them in there, because he is going to make his count. At the same time, he's not perfect. Pedro Munoz had some success hurting him early in that fight, backed him up in round 2. We saw some of the volume from Rivera's fall off, and that certainly is an issue with Almeida being such a capable, talented striker. How is Rivera going to deal with that? Ultimately, Almeida has the power and the skill to hurt and finish him, but he's going to struggle to match that pace and aggression, that forward march that Rivera offers. He never stops attacking. He never gives you an opportunity to rest. He's going to force Almeida to be on the defensive. It's going to take advantage of some of his defensive issues. We've already seen Rivera fight an experienced, long southpaw in Yuri Alcantara, and he had a lot of success in that fight. Takedowns are certainly going to be an option, I think, for Rivera, especially if this fight goes deep. Look for him to try and land some takedowns to really wear Almeida down. I think Rivera's going to land that big right hand around Almeida's guard, though. I think we're going to see Almeida get stumbled again, and Rivera's the type of guy, he knows how to finish. So my prediction is Jimmie Rivera to defeat Thomas Almeida by TKO. Fight number 2 in the main card takes place in the UFC's light heavyweight division as the 12th-ranked Patrick Durkin Cummins, 9 wins, 4 losses, and that glorious fucking mustache, people. That was incredible. Takes in the 13th-ranked Gian Villante with a current record of 15 wins and 7 losses. I always called him Gian when I first started predicting him back in Strikeforce. It's definitely, they refer to him as John, so we're going to go with that. Now, these, for the most part, are two flawed and kind of underachieving fighters, but still capable light heavyweights. There's no doubt about it. And with guys like Phil Davis and Ryan Bader walking away from the sport, these two individuals have, you know, the rough skill set to try and fill that gap. They might not reach the heights of those two individuals, but at least they have the ability to fill out the rankings, be there, be those grinding wrestlers with, you know, serviceable striking that gives some parts of the division some trouble. We'll see who comes out on top here. Now, Cummins is coming off a comeback win over Jan Blachowicz, which was very impressive. I picked Blachowicz in that fight, so I was wrong. Blachowicz got off to a great start, hurt Cummins early, and took over that first round. Cummins used his wrestling to get back in the fight and dominated rounds 2 and 3 and won a decision. For Villante, he's coming off a TKO loss to Shogun Rua. He has alternated wins and losses over his last 6, and 4 of his 5 UFC wins did come by knockout. Corey Anderson being a massive upset, very impressive victory. The 3 of his other victories have come over fighters who are now retired from the UFC, so definitely not an awesome track record for Villante. Gian, 6'3", he's 1 inch taller than Cummins. They have the same 76-inch reach, and Villante surprisingly 5 years younger than Patrick Cummins. Now, Cummins, we all are well aware, he's an NCAA Division I wrestler. 6.15 takedowns per fight at a 48% completion rate. So those are pretty good stats. Those are overwhelming numbers with that many takedowns in a fight. He had scored takedowns in 6 consecutive bouts prior to the Nogueira loss. He picked that back up against Blachowicz, picking up 3 takedowns en route to the victory. Now, for Cummins, his offense is incredibly predictable, but it's still difficult to stop. He wears opponents out from top position after taking them down and just busts them up. When he fought Rafael Feijão, he simply wore him out with that nonstop pressure and strikes, exhausted him. Feijão could no longer defend, and he took him out. Similar success against a very talented grappler in Antonio Carlos Jr. Ultimately, he didn't get the stoppage there, but still a dominant one-sided victory. Cummins is exceptionally strong once he gets his hands on his foe, but at the same time, he has that issue setting up his shot. You know, with a poor striking repertoire, it's difficult for him to disguise that shot and get in on the inside and get the fight to the mat. Now, as I said, he's not a great striker, and because he's not a great striker, at times he tends to, you know, he's very hittable. He's a little bit clumsy on his feet. When he shifts gears to say, okay, I'm going from striking to shooting for a takedown, he can be timed, he can be countered, he can be hurt. And ultimately, we've seen it's not just his striking skill, it's his durability on the feet. The big issue with Cummins is it's not whether or not he'll land takedowns. It's how much damage he's going to take between landing those takedowns. And, you know, we've seen fighters take him out. When he fought Jan Blachowicz, he was reaching for takedowns, especially early on when he got hurt, and that's why he was getting more hurt. He was getting cracked with an uppercut, overextending and getting tagged, and he survived, but still you can see what I'm talking about is how vulnerable he is, despite the fact that he is working in his wheelhouse when he's shooting on opponents. You know, Glover Teixeira hurt him between takedowns and eventually stopped them. OSP was on the defensive for almost the entire time they fought until he timed him, landed a shot, and knocked him out. Again, Jan Blachowicz, as I mentioned, big uppercuts and catching him and hurting him, and became very close to finishing Cummins until he basically Blachowicz gassed himself out. Now for Villante, he's a very strong starter, and one of his biggest weapons, probably his biggest weapon, are his kicks, both high kicks, body kicks, low kicks. He throws decent combinations. He's very active and sharp early on with his offense, but he tends to fade. We'll talk about that momentarily. With his hands, look for him to fire off a left jab. Again, lots of low kicks. That right low kick is right there. He will go high, and again, he will work a big right hand behind it. When he fought Corey Anderson before knocking him out, he obliterated him with low kicks and took away his base, took away his wrestling, made him very stationary and immobile, and eventually knocked him out. He caught him with a brutal right hand at the end of the 3rd round and put him down. Same thing against Anthony Parash. He took him out with a massive right hand. He'll work at an uppercut as well when the opportunity seizes itself. You know, in one of his more recent victories against Savarov, he was getting the better of him. He was landing a good left jab, that straight right, similar, having a lot of success early. He did against Tom Lawler, But he still gets tagged, he still gets hurt, he still starts to slow down, he can be put under pressure. Anderson had success blitzing him, Savarov had some success rallying in that fight at one point, dropped him, and we saw Villante's offense drop off in the second half. We saw Savarov hurt him, so he's one of these guys where he looks very good early, but as the fight progresses, the damage piles up, the cardio starts to break down, and he starts to get himself in trouble. The big question is, will he be able to stay vertical, and how does he do that? Against Ilir Latifi, he had a lot of success stuffing those early takedown attempts. He was, keeping Latifi on the outside and really, shutting them down when he did close the gap. We saw him throwing a lot of high kicks to avoid that early leg catch for a takedown. He mixed in some solid low kicks once Latifi started having to pay more attention to the high stuff. If he can land them consistently, he takes away his base and allows him to get in and, do damage without actually risking getting put on his back. Villante can wrestle. There's no doubt about it. He did give up 2 takedowns against Shogun. He gave up 3 takedowns against Latifi. but for the most part, he can wrestle. He's training partners with Chris Weidman, who's also preparing for this card, which is worth noting. They're prepping together, preparing. That should give him a certain boost. Villante hits very hard, and he has the striking advantage here. He needs to defend those takedowns, make Cummins pay on the feet, land those kicks to maybe bust him up and slow him down a little bit. I think he's eventually going to catch him with a big right hand, and my prediction is Gian Villante to defeat Patrick Cummins by knockout. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's featherweight division. The 10th-ranked Dennis the Menace Bermudez, 17 wins and 6 losses, looks to put a halt to a little bit of a skid down the rankings as he takes on the 12th-ranked Darren the Damage Elkins, 23 wins and 5 defeats. Now, looking at this, these are two fighters coming off vastly different results. Bermudez is coming off a crushing knockout loss to the Korean Zombie, a fight I correctly predicted, not to brag. I have to brag because I get so many wrong. He had won 2 fights in a row, both by decision, before suffering that big loss that certainly knocked him down the rankings, especially considering Korean Zombie was coming off such a long layoff. Now for Darren Elkins, he is coming off arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest comeback in the history of the sport, right up there. In an unreal upset over Mirsad Bektic, in a fight Bektic destroyed him pillar to post, and then Elkins, like it was nothing, knocked him out in the final frame. Like, Todd Duffy, Mike Russo style. Elkins has now won 4 in a row and is certainly putting together a nice winning streak that has him looking at the top 10 with a victory here. Physically, Elkins 4 inches taller. He has a 5-inch reach advantage, and he is 2 years younger than Bermudez. Now, Bermudez is coming off a second knockout loss. But more than that, he's been hurt in multiple occasions. He's had a couple submission defeats that have come with being knocked down. He's had fights where he's had to really scramble after slow starts where he got tagged and got himself in trouble. He also has 4 losses by submission, and he is 9-0 in fights going the distance. For Elkins, 11-2 in decisions, 8 wins by knockout. Not really known as a knockout artist, but he's a guy who just can hurt you with that volume and overwhelm you with that pace and picks up knockouts as a result. He has 2 losses in the same fashion and 3 submission wins. Now, for Darren Elkins, he is a hard-nosed, durable grinder who simply breaks guys down. He can take a beating and come back. He's done it twice, Bektic, and I picked him to do something similar against Diego Brandao way back in the day. He did that, survived an early onslaught, and rallied and took that fight over. For Bermudez, he's a good wrestler. He's a power fighter. He throws everything with power, does everything with power, very aggressive. He can get himself into trouble as a result, but it also works effectively when he doesn't get himself in trouble. Elkins, you look at his numbers, 19 takedowns over 3 fights prior to the Bektic win. He has been taken down on multiple occasions. Bektic picked up 4 takedowns in that fight. Diaz took down 5, so it took him down 5 times. So Elkins can certainly get out-wrestled. He can get out-grappled on the mat, and he's not perfect, but a lot of times he does get the better of his opponents on the floor. Once he does get the fight to the mat, he is a top position nightmare. He is the type of guy who just wears opponents out to no end. Good positional control against Chaz Skelly, who's a very good wrestler and a very good grappler. He shut him down on the mat, had a lot of success there. He has good flow of his ground and pound, just keeps chipping away. And again, as I said, he breaks guys. His cardio is part of the reason he's so effective there. He just keeps pushing forward and engaging, striking, shooting, walking them down. He's just, a ball of just forward pressure. Let's call it that. Additionally, in that Skelly fight, he had a lot of success using the wall to grind him out. Head positioning, really controlling him in that position, short punches, knees on the inside, and just, again, peppering away and trying to break guys. That's all he tries to do is break guys with that pressure. He's not trying to knock you out with one shot. He's trying to knock you out with the 50th shot he lands. His striking is still a work in progress. Certainly, he can crack guys. He throws kind of clubbing strikes over the top. But again, if he can draw you into a close quarters confrontation, he can set up his wrestling, he can set up his grappling, he can shoot into the clinch, or he can try and land something and change the complexion of a fight. Now for Bermudez, he, for the most part, fights in close proximity because he is a shorter, not nearly as long fighter as a lot of guys in the division, which is the case here. He will work strikes, he will work in the clinch, he'll change levels for takedowns, he'll shoot from the outside, he's got some big drive when he does shoot and try to get through his opponent's hips. I like the way he stands in the pocket. He likes to use movement, he'll throw a left jab in close, but he tends to attack in straight lines, which is certainly concerning. He throws some decent kicks, a front kick to the midsection, some chopping low kicks, which again he puts a lot of force into. If they get countered, he's in big trouble. Overall, he's had some issues with longer fighters that can really fight from the outside. Like Max Holloway had success there. Korean Zombie, once he got things going, had a lot of success from the outside. Even against Clay Guida, Bermudez had trouble coming up short with some of his punches, and he was getting cracked a couple times in that fight. We've seen him stun with a jab. Lama set up a guillotine. Like Mark Grice back in the day hurt him. Matt Grice. Yeah. hurt him in exchange. Jeremy Stevens and Korean Zombie both stopped him. Those are certainly concerns. We've seen him against Korean Zombie. He was having a lot of success early, and then the Zombie landed a couple of strikes, really backed him off. And once they backed him off with those couple of strikes, we saw the Zombie close in and really work in close, close the cage off and eventually scored a knockout with an uppercut. I don't like the way Bermudez leaves his chin out and overextends when attacking. Even Clay Guida, who's not known for his striking prowess, was landing some pretty good right hands, and had he landed one flush, he might have been able to knock him out. We could see Bermudez opt to take Elkins down here. He'd probably throw a mix at him if he gets in his groove. We saw him have success against Tetsuya Kawajiri in similar fashion. But ultimately, Elkins is tough. Not impossible to get out of there, and he doesn't have the striking skill to be a massive threat, but he'll still stand in trade. I would think Bermudez should look to wrestle here, but I think he's going to opt to strike. And the question, there's some questions about the Korean Zombie loss. Now he's been knocked out twice. How does that affect him? I think Elkins is going to drag him into a dogfight. He's eventually going to hurt him, back him up, and finish him. And my prediction in an upset is Darren Elkins to defeat Dennis Bermudez by TKO. Look for that reach to play a very big role. And finally, we move to the main event of the evening. It takes place in the UFC's middleweight division as the former champion, the number 5 ranked fighter in the division, Chris, the All-American Weidman, 13 wins and 3 losses, takes on the 8th ranked former Ultimate Fighter champion, Kelvin Gastelum, currently coming with a record of 14 wins and 2 losses. He is currently on Exile Island from the welterweight division. It appears to me middleweight is going to be his new home. We'll see how that plays out. Now, Weidman has lost 3 fights in a row coming into this, all by knockout. But you look at that record, a title fight loss against, he lost a title against Luke Rockhold. He lost to Yoel Romero, Super Freak Yoel Romero, and the recently departed Gegard Mousasi, who's now in Bellator. That's a pretty who's who of top middleweights he's been taking on. For Gastelum, he had won 3 fights in a row prior to the Vitor Belfort fight getting overturned for alleged marijuana use. So he has 2 wins unofficially at middleweight. For my purpose, we call a win what a win is, a performance that it resulted in his hand getting raised. Physically, though, Weidman 5 inches taller. He'll have a 7-inch reach advantage. Kelvin is the younger man by 7 years. Now, the first question I look here is, what has happened to Chris Weidman? Some people would say that he got his rise to winning the title on the basis of a series of fights against aging veterans. Mark Munoz, Damian Maia, 2 fights with Anderson Silva, Lyoto Machida, and Vitor Belfort. Then he ran into fighters who were in a better position in their careers and started to struggle. Weidman, for the most part, has been a very good starter, but the issue is when damage and fatigue starts to set in, he gets himself in trouble. That happened against Luke Rockhold, that happened against Mousasi. It's just one of those concerns you see where things eventually unravel for him. And Kelvin Gastelum had a lot of success outlanding Tim Kennedy. He survived the early grappling attempts, he hurt him, he pushed him, and he eventually finished him. He stopped Vitor Belfort on the feet, and again, those are 2 big wins, but they're not, both Kennedy's retired, Vitor Belfort's closing in on that. We'll see again how Gastelum fares in a fight against a guy who's in a better spot in his career. Now, one of the other big questions about this fight is how and when will the size issue come into effect for Kelvin when fighting as a middleweight? Belfort and Kennedy aren't huge middleweights by any stretch of the imagination. As I said, they're at the end of their runs. Weidman is a very big man. He has faced top-level competition, and all indications, despite his recent setback, would suggest he's still in a good spot in his career. Conversely, on this side, the lack of a cut and speed edge certainly have been big factors in Kelvin's success. He needs to remain focused, though, in this fight, not miss weight like we saw Johnny Hendricks miss weight at 185 pounds. So something that can certainly be distracting and be an issue. If you have problems making weight, Kelvin needs to stay on top of things. Now, Gastelum, he does his best work in close. Push forward behind punches and pressure and unload. He's light on his feet. He slams in good leg kicks, which will be used to make up some of that distance. He throws a nice body kick at range. I love the way he paws, jabs with his right hand and then fires a straight left or left hook around it. He has a clean left hand over the top, which he can really do damage with if it connects. He does a nice job of making his opponent swing and miss and then landing his own strikes in their retract, if you will. When he fought Kennedy, he had a lot of success pressuring Kennedy in the clinch on the mat, made him carry his weight once he kind of got things established in that fight and started wearing him down. He can work his wrestling. He's also had issues on the mat. And the big question is, how effective is Kelvin Gastelum? I don't see him shooting in and taking down Chris Weidman. What he's focused on is being defensive, making Weidman work for takedowns, wearing Weidman out in pursuit of getting the fight to the ground, and eventually those takedown attempts will become weaker, less frequent, and that's a good sign for Kelvin Gastelum when he's taking over the fight. Now, Weidman, he had 1 takedown in the Romero fight. He had 3 takedowns in the Rockhold fight. Machida, he took him down 5 times. He took down Mousasi 4 times early in that fight. He's very good at landing that single leg and turning the corner to put them on their backside. I would say if I was his coach, use your size, ground Kelvin Gastelum, keep him on his back, and break him down. He's good at controlling. For the most part, he's good at controlling his opponents. Hold top position, land ground and pound elbows. He will look for submissions. But ultimately against Giga Mousasi, he could not keep him on the mat. He could not keep him down for any prolonged period of time before Mousasi just kind of shucked him off and got back to a vertical base and went to work. I did like what I've seen out of Weidman in the past, using his wrestling to set up his striking, faking a takedown and firing a left hook. He's had success with pressure in the past. His combination striking is decent, but again, he hasn't looked quite as sharp in recent fights. We've also seen him, even prior to this recent slump when he fought Machida, he got hurt. He didn't respond well. He didn't respond well to getting hit against Mousasi. It just seemed like as soon as Mousasi started landing, we saw Weidman start to turtle up, start to shell up, and the end wasn't that far away, even though it was controversial anyway. I think ultimately Kelvin Gastelum needs to survive the early wrestling push. We're going to probably see Kelvin spend some time on his back inside those first 2 rounds, but he's going to force Chris Weidman to work hard. He's going to force him to have to shoot for multiple takedowns. He's going to have to, he's going to have to defend. He's going to start landing strikes once those takedowns again become weaker and less frequent. 5-round fight, keep that in mind, Kelvin Gastelum. That's certainly to his advantage. Look for him to pressure Weidman, put his punches together, take over after the early rounds have eclipsed, and my prediction is Kelvin Gastelum to defeat Chris Weidman by TKO. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC on Fox. Sorry, 4 main card predictions. My prelims will all be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Please check them out. Follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. Hook us up on Facebook as well. I try and post stuff there as much as possible. Recently, it's just been a very... as you can tell, this podcast is exceptionally late. My last one was late as well. So I'm trying to get stuff out of there, but it's just very difficult. And I had a lot of trouble actually watching the last couple of events live. I've had to catch up later on. Thank you very much, Fight Pass. But either way, I'm looking forward to this card. It should be a good card. Lots of prelims to break down, and we don't have a lot of time to do it. So let's get after it. And thanks for tuning in, guys. Talk to you soon.